everyone, and welcome to Empowering the Opposition. My name is Lexi Wilson. I'm a licensed master social worker.
And my name is Dr. Nafis Alam, and our topic today will be strategies in self-care. We'll be covering a few viewpoints on a multitude of self-care practices, and Lexi, will start with you. Tell the listeners some of the things that you do for self-care on a daily or weekly or monthly basis.
Ooh. First of all, I just think self-care is so important. Like, even as Nafis and I are sitting here right now, I'm just so tired and exhausted from like this week and just everything going on. And so I just want to first and foremost say that I think it is important. What I do for myself personally for self-care, which has been hammered into my mind so much since graduate school, really is when I was really a topic of continuous discussion on self-care. What's interesting about it, though, is that I've been able to self-care a lot more after graduate school is over and really explore different ways that I can really care for myself and energize myself and just give back to myself. And so for me, I would say I do a lot of different things. One thing that I do is I love running in the foothills. I just love being out in nature. And most of the time I don't even wear earbuds. I just it kind of grounds me. It helps me just kind of reconnect with nature. And then after that, I'll watch, the sunset, which is just, I don't know, very nice. And then like at the gym, I love the stair stepper, just like sweating out, and just really getting all that energy out because I'm a very kind of high energy person and I need to get that out. And if I don't, I get very anxious. Other things that I do, obviously shopping. I like shopping.
Retail therapy, right?
Retail therapy, of course. And then I have some like spiritual practices as well. So I pray and I try to write in a prayer journal. I'm trying to think of other self-care things. I love coffee in the morning. That just kind of starts my day off well. Travel for me is also really important for my self-care, just getting out of my comfort zone. But that's what I can think of at the top of my head. What about you?
Well, I think having a routine is the best form of self-care for me. And I think, we'll get into this more as we record today, but, there may be opposing viewpoints to self-care that we still want to cover, with empowering the opposition. But for me, it's about having a routine. Anytime that I'm not able to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and have my coffee, 2 cups of coffee with the Keto creamer that I like, the protein creamer, and I have to have it just up to a certain
particular way.
Exactly. And, I love silence in the morning. I don't like to really interact much until I've had my coffee. When it's warmer, I'll have coffee on my balcony. I work out about 2 hours a day 2 hours of lifting and then an hour of cardio every single day. That is huge self-care because I, like yourself, I don't wear earbuds, and many times I'll work out without, any kind of audio stimulation just because, I like to focus on the weight, like what am I lifting and how am I lifting it, so good form, and just knowing that I'm moving the kind of weight that most people wouldn't even be able to if they work their butt off for their entire lives. So it's that self-care of knowing that you're in a place where many others cannot get to. And same thing with once I'm done working out too, I'll come back and I'll just work on some of the research that I've been doing, writing some articles, grading some papers, and you would think that that's work, but it really depends on, a few weeks ago we did the mindset episode, right?
Yeah.
So I also think that there's a correlation between self-care and mindset, in that many of the things that I'm saying right now, our listeners might be working out 3 hours sounds like a nightmare. Mindset. Working out for me for 3 hours
and it's
is
also
self-care.
Individualized too, right? What's awesome for you is not going to be awesome for others, and that's just a part of like being human too. And then that mindset aspect too, right? I think there's days and times when we feel like what we need to do for our self-care, we don't, because we just don't want to, right? Whether that be working out or, going outside and taking a walk or calling a friend or whatever it is. Sometimes we just don't want to do those things. So that is, I think, where the mindset comes in.
Yeah. And I think, eating healthy. Anytime that I'm not eating healthy, I feel like I'm just letting myself down. I think for me, which may be different from many listeners, is that it's the routine. For many, self-care is about taking themselves outside of routine. Let's take a vacation. Let's do something spontaneous. Let's, I don't know, wake up at X o'clock in the morning and watch the sun rise. You know, let's do something different.
Yeah.
And for them, it's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
That's their idea of self-care. For me individually, that is not my idea of self-care. Routine, something
is what you really like,
Exactly.
and that gives you that sense of like, just like satisfaction. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, because also too with this self-care, not only do you have, routine versus non-routine that can help you and contribute to your self-care, but I think there's aspects of self-care too that is like extraversion or introversion, right? Some people, for example, even though I love to talk and I will chat anyone's, just mouth off, I actually get my energy from being alone. And so I need a certain amount of like alone time to just kind of recharge and refuel. Whereas other people who are more extroverted get their energy from talking with others and doing, things with other people. And so I think that's an interesting aspect of self-care as well.
I think the differences in individual ideas of what self-care is, that element is rarely talked about. So when I've taken self-care trainings, and really, to be honest with you, I think most organizations, most universities, of course, but also most organizations in general have topics of self-care because they want happy employees, because happy employees means more money, right? So that's being generated, more profits. Rarely, if ever, if I can't really recall anything in that regard, have I heard someone say that these may work for you and these may be the opposite of what self-care is for you. So it's generally one of the main things that I really wanted to talk about today, in this topic area, and here we go, empowering the opposition, is that most of my mentors, even to this day, will tell me, Nafis, when you're on vacation, when it's the weekend, the best thing to do for self-care is to disconnect. Don't check work email. Nothing work related. But my explanation to them has been that doing that is not self-care for me, because in my mind, and I'm sure it'll make sense to you, might not agree with it, but this is never
your
about
self-care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, if I'm on vacation, if I'm up in McCall, let's say, and I'm supposed to be off my phone, not thinking about, work and stuff like that, if that's what I'm supposed to be doing, the fact that I'm intentionally ignoring my work emails, that stresses me out.
Yeah.
That makes me feel like I'm not enjoying my vacation, because I'm trying to enjoy my vacation too much by ignoring everything else besides the vacation, which is very counterintuitive, I should say. And I acknowledge that, and I've explained that to my mentors as well. And of course, like, my mentors are in social work, so obviously they understand me once I've explained it to them. But for other people, I understand that, like, it's just the work's piling up. I need to disconnect for 2 days. I am not an employee. I'm not a professor. I'm not this. I'm not that.
Yeah.
But for me, disconnecting is the absolute opposite of self-care. Absolute opposite of self-care.
And that's a really good point I think you bring up. And just, a question that I guess I would kind of throw out to our listeners is, what is self-care for you? Because I never really thought, that how we prescribe our self-care, or how others like to prescribe it onto us, seems to be very similar, like you were just saying. And for me personally, I'm very, very much so the opposite of what you had just said. So like for me, it's really important for my self-care to set very strong boundaries with work. And when I log off, and no one better contact me, because I'm not going to answer. Someone better be dying. Because if I don't, and I have those looser boundaries with work, then it'll just encapsulate my whole life. And that is what stresses me out, right? I can be a workaholic. And so, that is something that is very important for me, and that is my self-care, and that works for me, right? But as you can see here with both of these really great examples, like, what self-care is for both Nafis and I are so different.
Yeah.
And what stresses us out is so different.
I know, yeah. So what stresses me out would calm you down.
Yes, yeah. And the opposite.
Yeah. And the opposite is true as well. Mm-hmm. And, the other thing that I've noticed about self-care trainings is that rarely is long-term self-care also taught.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's usually self-care from a weekend standpoint or a week standpoint or even maybe a month standpoint. But what about self-care long-term? As in, obviously you're going to have peaks and valleys and emotions and life experiences, of course. We all have peaks and valleys in our lives. What are you doing on a regular basis to achieve long-term self-care?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And one of the things that comes to mind is that, sort of the same thing that, as I was saying earlier, maintaining a regular schedule, going to sleep, no later than usually 12 o'clock
I'm up till
night.
Like 1 or 2 in the morning, but self-care is different for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. And then waking up at 8 o'clock. And making sure to get that 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Sometimes I'll wake up a little bit later. Sometimes I'll go to sleep a little bit earlier, like around 10 o'clock. But I'll get a minimum of 8 to 10 hours of sleep every day. And a day or two makes no difference whatsoever. Like, for example, certain Saturdays, like if I'm hanging out on a Friday night and then the following Saturday I have to go coach youth football, I'm not getting my 8 hours. I'm barely getting 4 hours now that I think about it. So I'm very, very extra cranky. It's a good thing. It's a good thing you don't see me on Saturdays usually. But the next day, Saturday night into Sunday morning, like I'll get like 12 hours of sleep because I'll intentionally plan that. So the idea here is to average over the course of 7 days and over the course of a month, 30 days, average 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night. That's what works for me. My father, so different.
Ooh, interesting.
My why did I say father? Like
my
this is
father.
Star Wars. Yeah.
My father.
Yes. My dad is very different. He was always the last to go to sleep. My mom was,
and the first to wake up.
up.
Do you have insomnia?
No. And he would sleep snoring and like he was out. He did not take naps either.
Oh,
so
I'm a napper.
Yeah. His operating sleep schedule was about 4 to 5, maybe 6 hours. He's a little bit older now, so obviously he gets more sleep.
Yeah.
But, during his most, productive days from a career standpoint, I remember, like, we would be tired, my brother and I, we're about to go to bed, and my dad is still up, doing his work. He loves to read. And then when it was time for us to wake up, and, like, me and my brother, we would wake up, and we'd go downstairs, and there's Abu. Abu means dad in Bengali, right? So there's Abu, and he's ready. He's like, hey, good morning. What are you guys doing? I'm like, wake up. We're lazy, And we're like, what's going on here? This man is like 3 times our age.
And he's just up and ready to start the day.
Yeah. So now I do remember a couple of instances where, he got a little bit sick and he got more sleep than he generally got. And he felt worse. So exactly. So for him, his optimal sleep schedule is 4 to 6 hours. For me, if I was getting 46 hours, we would not be having this podcast.
Oh, I would be dead. Irritated. Yeah, I need at least 8 to 10. Yeah, like that's my primal range. Yeah, it's so interesting how everyone's sleep schedules are so different. Their self-care is so different. I mean, everything. And I really liked what you were saying about just long-term self-care. And what comes to mind too is like how the choices we make every single day, the ones that we continuously make every single day, right? The things we're eating, the things we're putting into our bodies, the thing, us, working out or movement, like all those things, and sleep obviously are so important. Maybe not in that day, right? You're not really going to see those long-term effects, but you will see those long-term effects decades down the road if you're sleep deprived, if you're not, eating the right nutrition, if you're not, really trying to be active and stuff like that. There are those long-term consequences. And so I think it's just important to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So long-term self-care, I think, is very important to me, very important to other people as well. Because self-care in isolation almost gives you a peek into what you don't have. Like if you're only going to do it for a week, then it's essentially reminding you what you're not able to do. And it sort of piles on, because then you get into the mindset, again, going to a previous podcast, you get into the mindset that, well, I work, 40 hours a week. I get, what is it, 20 days of vacation is the general person, right?
Yeah.
So you're working every day, like with almost no breaks. It's not like you and I are different. We're in academia, right? So we have it good from a scheduling standpoint. But the general person who is listening to this podcast, 40 hours a week, 21 vacation days, 3 weeks of vacation days per year. But if you're only thinking of those 3 weeks of vacation as your source of self-care for the entire year, and the rest of the time you're eating unhealthy because you're just in so much of a crunch. You're just grabbing something and going, something unhealthy potentially. You're not working out because you're exhausted by the time you get home. Like, which is understandable. There's everyone, has their own life and their own reasons. But long-term self-care cannot just be 3 weeks out of a year.
Exactly. And I really would like to speak to this for a couple reasons. One of the greatest quotes that I heard was, make room for your wellness or you will have to face an illness.
Yeah.
And, something along those lines. And kind of going back to what you were saying as well, Nafis, about how some people just eat really badly and not have time to work out. That was me during grad school. I mean, that's all I focused on. I was eating super unhealthy, drinking really bad coffees every day, was not working out, was just like, it was so much on my plate. And I think that's how so many just average, Americans feel, is just they have so much responsibility and they're spread so thin. And I didn't make those things a priority in my life when I really should have. And I could have carved out that time, however small. And now it's like, I feel really lucky because now I have, some more time, not a ton of time, but I have more time and I'm able to really just focus on my self-care and incorporating these things. And so I've really personally experienced both sides of these coins here. And I can tell you it is so much nicer to really incorporate these small little things into my routine. And that I really already see a huge payoff in, not only in my energy, but just how I feel. And it's not always perfect all the time, but those little things do pay off. You just have to be disciplined in doing them every day. Yeah.
And if we're empowering the opposition too, there are people out there who feel the greatest comfort in chaos, right? So I worked on Wall Street, and many of those guys were addicted to chaos.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, anything that's static was just so boring and bland to them. Yeah. So they loved coming into work at 7:00, leaving at 7:00, and just being busy every minute, every second of the entire day, but not knowing what they'd be doing the next day. So they know that they're going to be busy tomorrow, but they don't know what they're going to be doing. Yeah. But they just know that they're going to be doing something.
And they really flourished on that.
They did. And for them, the idea of self-care, it was just being completely stimulated at all times, and in a spontaneous kind of way where they don't know what's next or anything like that. So it's a constant roller coaster ride. Yeah. And generally speaking, the roller coaster ride analogy is made or stated in such a way as to indicate negativity, but for many it's not. For many, people prefer, if we were to even take it out of the context of self-care and we were talking about relationships, which I guess at some point we should have a podcast on relationships.
Oh, God.
When you say that there's a roller coaster relationship that you have with someone, it has generally negative connotations, but who are you to say that that's not something that people want? There are people out there who want the ups and downs, and I've dated plenty of women who've said that I prefer the ups and downs. I don't want anything steady. I want just angry one day, I'm loving the next day. I have no idea what's going on.
Sounds some crazy attachment issues
exactly.
Right
there.
Well,
that's what we're going to save it for a different podcast for a different day. That'll probably go for about an hour and a half.
Oh, man. Good Lord.
So some people may thrive in chaos. Some people may prefer that roller coaster type of lifestyle.
I mean, I've definitely met people like that. And, some people feel suffer from like that chronic boredom, right? If they're not constantly being stimulated 24/7, then, you know, they don't feel like fulfilled. Or even, at least my experience when I did my internship in the ER and was working a lot with, you know, psychiatric patients, it was fascinating. Like, I can totally see why a certain kind of like group of people gravitate towards those kind of jobs, right? Whether it be like on Wall Street or whether it be like in an ER hospital room. You never know what's going to come next. You're excited, that adrenaline gets going. You just don't know what's going to happen next. Like, so I can totally see how that can be something really, you know, attractive. For some people.
Oh, that's a great analogy too, between Wall Street and the emergency room. And then when you take the emergency room doctor out of the emergency room,
put them in family care. Oh,
right,
they would hate their lives.
Yeah. So it really is a personalized self-care plan that you want to design for yourself, and you don't want to think that someone else's self-care plan is the best self-care plan for you, as you and I have already noticed between what we think of as self-care. But I mean, so we have long-term self-care. We also have some of the topics that relate to long-term self-care and short-term self-care that are lesser talked about just because they tend to be more nuanced. Like, for example, spirituality, which we talked about.
Yes, yeah.
That's a huge element of self-care too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, we kind of forget this like spiritual aspect of some people. And I think it's a part that people kind of forget about or, you know, neglect sometimes because everything else gets in the way. And yeah, so I think that is a really, really important aspect of some people's lives. And that can obviously, like we talked about last week, look different for everyone, right? It can be, you know, yoga or like meditation or going up and hiking. Maybe that's your spirituality. Maybe it's, you know, any of the religions we listed off last week and talked about, you know.
Stoicism, right?
Stoicism, yes. But I think that's a really good point, and that is something that we need to be, I think, a little more cognizant of, if that's something that, you know, you are drawn to in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. So if spirituality is something that you're drawn to, then obviously you can use that as self-care. And of course, there are plenty of people that find spirituality to be more of a burden and it would be the opposite of self-care. Oh, we've talked about nutrition.
Or even damaging, too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories on how that, you know, well, maybe it's just because I like watching cult documentaries, but that could be very damaging.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it depends on who you've linked up with and now, like, you know, what you're following. You know, sports can be very, you know, in the line of self-care as well, you know, in addition to fitness. And sometimes it's not just about playing sports, you know, which falls into that fitness category, but watching sports. Every Sunday I'll watch Red Zone for like 7 hours straight. Sundays are generally days that I don't have anyone come over and I don't do anything outside of the house. And I'll just, you know,
it's kind of your just relaxing day.
Yeah, which obviously will change once, like, you know, snowboarding season comes up, because that'll be like a great way of self-care. And that's the other thing too. I think it's the idea that if a particular kind of self-care works for you now, it doesn't mean that you have to stick with it. Yeah. To the point where it becomes no longer self-caring, but now it becomes more like an obligation, right? A burden.
We have the absolute right to adjust things and move it in whatever direction we want and try new self-care activities. Like, I think that's one of the most fun things that I've had the opportunity to do since I finished graduate school, is to just try all these new fun hobbies like boxing, which you've gotten me into, right? Gonna be trying snowboarding up here pretty soon. Like,
you're killing it on the boxing.
Yeah, so, it's so fun. But yeah, there's just a lot of different things we can try, and I think that's one thing I would encourage. I mean, keep the things that you know are good, but also like explore some other things because it's fun and we're human and we like to play, you know. We kind of miss that from when we were kids and we don't really explore like that anymore.
It's funny you mentioned play, right? Because think about what play is to a child. That is self-care to a child. A child is, you know, stressed not because they know what to be stressed about, but rather because they don't know what to be stressed about. Yeah. So for a child, everything is life or death because that's all they know. They don't know how to, you know, prioritize stressors. So play is the ultimate in self-care. Let me take myself out of this world and put myself into, I don't know, Barbies and superheroes, whatever, the kids are doing these days.
and it's like now I think play for adults, right? That's going to be like video games. A lot of people love, video games, or like, even sports obviously is like play, or I don't know. There's just so many different kind of like other things that we can do to kind of give us that same presence, that same mindfulness. Like, I don't know about you, Nifis, but I feel like when I think about when I was little and just how crazy my imagination was, like you just come up with these crazy things in your head when you're like playing with your other friends when you're young, and like you come up with these stories and you make plays, or maybe I was just a weird kid.
No, I'm with you on that.
And I did all those things, and you just think about, just how creative your mind was and just how good that was for you. And it's just interesting seeing how different it is as an adult, right? We give ourselves not as much permission to be able to do that now.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you have a very free mind as a child, whereas at the older you get, it seems like you're becoming more of an adult and you are more structured, but it doesn't mean that every part of you has to be structured at all times. Or maybe it does. I mean, if we're empowering the opposition, we have to be cognizant and aware of the existence of people who prefer that adult structured, perspective. And these are the kinds of people that may struggle when they're around children, for example. Why are they playing? I don't understand. Like, what is the point of imagination? I don't have an imagination.
What's the point of imagination?
So, I mean, there is a point to be made there. I mean, not saying that I agree with it, but again, consistent with the spirit of the podcast, we have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, of those other views. Yeah. It's just an important thing to think about, I think, especially right now with everything, going on about self-care. And yeah, I just challenge our listeners this week, think about what self-care means to you or not, write those things down. Maybe have a conversation with a loved one or a friend about self-care. What do they like to do? What do you like to do? What are some things you want to steal from your friends to do, right?
Because you don't know,
you don't know until you try.
Right, exactly.
I didn't know boxing, although I'd always wanted to do it. I didn't know I would love boxing, and it'd be something that I would really enjoy doing.
It's so cathartic when you're hitting that thing.
It is. It's wonderful. You just get out all this aggression.
Yeah.
It's just which is so funny. It's so funny, like going into the gym and seeing all these girls, and I'm just like hitting this bag, and they look so scared. But anyway, I'll take that out. But
no, absolutely. I mean, no, there's no. It makes sense, doesn't it? It's something that works for you. It doesn't have to work for anybody else. And I think when people see you being unique in the way that you practice self-care, they feel like they now have permission to explore the same on their own. So maybe you going and hitting the heavy bag, being one of the few women that actually does that, which we do need more women in combat sports.
Yes, we do, ladies. Yes, we do.
So now another young lady might see you doing that, but they might not want to do boxing, but they might say, well, maybe I'll do something that is maybe weightlifting, because that generally tends to be male dominated too. And
weightlifting's so fun too. I mean, I used to do that. I used to do it a lot more in high school when I was playing soccer, but it was so fun. And like, I don't know. I think it's really fun to explore those different things that maybe you just wouldn't normally try. And it gives other people permission to explore those things and be creative in that same note. And,
on the flip side, and empowering the opposition, understand, talking to ourselves as well as to our listeners, that as you're trying new things for self-care, some of those things you're going to hate. I'm just thinking about my cousin. I'm not going to name his name.
My cousin.
He loves... what is it called? The puzzles, but the jigsaw puzzles. Man, I don't need, he's younger than me and he likes jigsaw puzzles. So that might be interesting.
I don't have the patience for a puzzle. No, I'm sorry. I don't. They just annoy me.
More power to him. I love him to death, obviously, but my goodness, our jigsaw puzzle's boring. He got 1,000-piece puzzle.
Oh God, that sounds like a nightmare. That would, because I'm the kind of person, when I sit down to do something, I have to have it done.
I want to complete it.
It needs to be completed now. I don't like to I would just feel angry not having it done.
But you see, he's the type of person, and I've done studied him obviously as I study everyone. We can't help it.
We all study
right?
everybody.
Exactly.
It's true.
So he's the kind of person that he needs to be able to escape other things into that which he is familiar with. Right? So he likes to have like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle going, but not completing it. Obviously, you can't complete it in a day or anything like that. But he likes knowing that there's something in the other room
to go do.
Exactly. And just take his mind off whatever he's doing at the time. So this way he can do that. Chip away at it, put a couple of pieces in there.
And over time, it eventually becomes this beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, and then he's able to come back to the work that he's doing or the endeavors that he's taken on. And he's able to focus on that. So it just goes back to the idea that you have to have the self-awareness to understand what self-care techniques work best for you.
For you, absolutely. And for all you jigsaw puzzles out there, for all you jigsaw puzzle lovers out there.
No hate,
no hate, but it's just not our thing, I guess.
Yeah. And you know what? They might not like the things that we do as well.
Exactly. So. And I can see why people would like it, right? If you're going at it with the intent of this is something I'm going to do over a couple months. Awesome. But me, I'm I want this done now in an hour. That's not going to happen, obviously.
Yeah. One of my mentors does crossword puzzles. Is that the daily thing that comes out, with the...
Oh, yeah. Crossword, yeah.
Yeah. So he'll do that every morning, and that's how he starts his day. So he would say that this is how he wakes his brain up. And I tried doing that because, again, I'll give anything a shot once. And not for me either. I
need an hour and a half to wake my brain up, and it just has to do so on its own gradually. I cannot do anything complicated in the morning. I'm just not a morning person in general. So,
and you know what? I think also empowering the opposition on the other side is that to understand that by no means are we, or I should speak for myself in particular, am I trying to pretend like I'm cooler than someone who does jigsaw puzzles or crossword puzzles? I'll tell you one self-care activity that I love to do that most puzzlers or crossword puzzlers would find utterly boring is theoretical physics. I have no affiliation or links.
No, you have that honorary degree.
Right, that you gave me a few weeks ago, right? Yeah. I forgot about that. Still waiting on the certificate.
Yeah, it's late, but it's okay. COVID.
Got lost in the mail, I'm sure. But I love theoretical physics and just trying to figure out how gravity and chemistry impact, time and all that good stuff that, obviously we're not going to get into here because we don't want to lose listeners. We want to keep them. But many of our listeners would say, that's your hobby. That's something that you enjoy. That's your self-care. And usually the primary question would be are you doing anything with this? Who's making you do this? I'm no one's making me do this. No.
It's just for fun.
Yeah, it's for fun. And for me, it's a lot of fun. And for other people are
they'd be like, oh, this is gross. Why would I do this? Yeah. Something that I do for self-care too is I love listening to podcasts. Really, I only really listen to two of them. And one of them's the Joe Rogan Experience. I love listening to that. And that's something that really just helps to kind of get me through the day as I'm working and kind of helps to give me some self-care and just kind of be thinking about things in the back of my head while I'm doing work, which I really enjoy. I'm trying to think of another geeky, weird, self-care activity I have.
Well, podcasts for sure, growing your mind and, staying in tune with society and everything that's going on.
Oh, and then also there's nothing I love more than going in my Jeep and blasting music, hip hop, rap, anything. And I just will put it as high as it can go. Sorry, Mom. I'm already going to apologize because I know you're going to text me about this for bursting my eardrums probably. But I love just putting my music on so loud and just driving throughout Boise with nowhere to go and just singing and driving and that is such a self-care activity for me. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a nomadic road trip.
You don't have a brief nomadic road trip.
Yeah, because you have nowhere to go.
No destination. Yep. and I'm just rocking out and having fun, and no one can tell me my voice sucks because I already know it does. So it's fine. Like I just own it. And the funniest part is watching people in the other cars, and they just like stare at me, and I'm just like, just singing and moving my arms and just having a good time. And
I wish this was video so our listeners could see what you're pantomiming here.
I know. I'm like moving my arms. They're like flailing about. Yeah. I'm crazy. So if you see some crazy girl like driving around Boise screaming and singing in her car, that's me.
But that's the thing though, is that other people might look at you, or some people might look at you and say like, she's crazy. I don't know why she's doing it. Whereas in empowering the opposition, you have to understand that there are others who may be looking at you and saying, like, if she can do this, I can do this too.
It's
sort of like dancing or karaoke.
Yeah.
It's everyone has a bad voice. Like, it's not just you. It's not just me.
It's like 98% of the population.
None of us are Sam Smith.
Yeah.
Like, I personally think he has one of the best voices.
He does. He's a beautiful voice.
Yeah. So none of us, except Sam Smith is Sam Smith.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do karaoke, we're not going to sound like him, even though I'm probably going to pick a Sam Smith song to start off with, or Mariah Carey back in the day. I'd probably pick a Mariah Carey song and try and hit those notes.
And those are fun. Ooh, the Backstreet Boys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Exactly. So, like, once you get the ball rolling, and same thing with dancing, like, none of us are professional dancers, but I'll jump into the middle of the dance floor and get the party going.
And I feel like we're so, as adults, we reach this kind of threshold where we're like, we care what other people think, and that can be like this battle. And then it's just like, as of lately, I don't know what it is. It's probably just 2020 and I'm just kind of like, screw it. But I feel like I have just given so many, like, I just don't care anymore. I was gonna say something else, but I just don't. I just don't.
Zero fucks, as they say. Yes.
I was gonna say no fucks are given.
Nary a fuck given.
Yes. Right? Yes. Nary. Did you say nary?
Yeah, nary. Like Shakespearean language.
Nary a fuck. We'll take this out. Okay.
I think we need to keep this in.
Yeah, we need to keep this in. Okay. Well, whatever. And anyway, you just reach this point when you just don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I can't control what anyone else thinks, and I'm going to do what makes me happy, and I don't care what anyone else says, and I'm going to live my life and be happy, and I don't care. And it's so nice.
Absolutely it is.
Oh, it's so freeing and satisfying.
It's freeing for you, but it's also potentially freeing for
others,
observers, because they're like, well, this gives me permission to do the same.
Exactly.
Maybe not sing in my car, but whatever it is for them that they might be embarrassed about,
they can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you don't know how many people's lives you're impacting without even knowing it.
Just by being authentically your weirdo self.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I'm so weird. And just when I'm able to just be myself and just not care, it just feels so good. And I just want everyone to, to be able to feel that way. Just, I don't know. It's nice to feel like a kid every now and again.
I genuinely feel that everyone is weird, and anyone who's not, I feel like
they're faking it.
Yeah, I don't know them.
Yeah.
Truly.
That's true. That's true.
Once I know what makes them weird, that's when I truly feel like I've built a connection.
That's true. Yeah. Once you know, like, this person's crazy and maybe like, well, yeah, that's when I know I want to be their friend.
Exactly.
For sure.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'm Dr. Nafis Alam.
And I'm Lexi Wilson, a licensed master social worker. This has been Empowering the Opposition. See you next time.